This is an incident during a diving trip. There were only 3 of us on this trip. We set sail from Singapore at around 10 a.m. on a Friday. We were hoping to make a couple of drops at Pulau Tong Kong Yu. There are a lot of tuskies and coral trouts on the surrounding reef. There is a small airplane wreck on the western side of the island, lying at around 24 meters. After filling up the esky with some tasty coral trouts, we continued our journey up north. By the time we got to the Japanese wreck, it was around 3 a.m. We anchored down and went to sleep. We woke up at around 7 a.m. We had our coffee and worked out our attack plan. As there were only 3 of us, we would do 1 dive each and then move on to Jubilee Shoal. My 2 buddies, A and B, wanted the first drop. Both of them are very experienced hunters. Since we had been anchored for so long, we needed to reposition the boat as the anchor had shifted. After we re-anchored, the 2 of them geared up. The current is starting to run, so A said that he will check on the anchor to make sure that it is secured. The pair then proceeded to descend down the anchor line. I decided to make myself another coffee while I waited for them. Just when I finished making the coffee and was about to sit down and relax, I heard a shout. It was the sound of B's voice shouting for me. It's been less than 3 minutes since they descended. Maybe he forgot his fish stringer, I thought. So I went outside to have a look. I saw B towing A at the side of the boat towards the ladder. A's face was in agony. We had to help him remove all his gear before he could climb up the ladder. He had dislocated his shoulder. This was the first time something like this has ever happened to him, and we didn't know how to pop it back in. We decided to head back to Tioman and hope that someone could help. According to the 2 of them, just when they got to the anchor, they heard singing, but both of them pretended not to hear. A thought that the anchor might slip, so he decided to move it to a better position. Just when he picked up the anchor, his shoulder popped. The anchor is a small 25-kilogram Bruce anchor. Anybody could pick it up with no problem. There is a ferry company at Tangchung Gemok that runs ferries to and from Tioman. It's about 20 years ago, one of the ferry caught fire and sunk about 30 kilometers from Tioman. I think 9 people were trapped and died. Maybe someone could do some research and confirm the accident. I know this boatman who found the coordinates of the wreck, so we contacted him and he agreed to bring us to the spot. Our plan is to sail up and meet him at an island just off of Tioman. He'll sail out from Endarampin to meet us. We set sail on Friday night so that we'll reach Tioman at around 6 a.m., meet up with our guide at 7 a.m., and hopefully make the first drop at 7:30. Everything went as planned. We got to the bay where we were supposed to meet at 5 a.m. We anchored up and went to sleep. The boatman came alongside at around 7:30. We followed his boat to the spot. We then found the location on the echo sounder and dropped our marker buoy. We paid the boatman for the spot and off he went. We decided to do a bit of drift fishing near the wreck first before we decimate it with steel shafts. According to the boatman, he caught a lot of green-eyed groupers there and lost a lot of big fish there. We set up the drift and on our first pass, we got a grouper. On the second pass, we got 3 groupers and 1 huge bite, but it bust off. By the way, there were 4 of us on this trip now. We decided to anchor up and started slinging steel. 1 guy will remain as boatman while the 3 of us will do the first drop. I quickly donned my gear and got in before the other 2. The first one always gets the big fish. I started finning down following the marker line. At 15 meters, I saw the blurry shape of the ferry. It was upside down and entirely covered with 3-inch stripy snappers. It's a rare sight to see so many fish together. You could hardly see the hole at all. I descended right down to the sand at 26 meters and started crawling towards the wreck. Then, I saw a huge red snapper just next to the wreck. I took aim and impaled the fish right in the brain. It shuddered, opened its mouth, and laid on its side. By then, 2 of the other divers had arrived, both flipping me the bird. As I got myself a big one, I let them go ahead while I stayed behind and looked for stragglers. I could see a lot of 1 kilogram sized groupers laying around, not worth shooting. The big fishes are all swimming inside the wreck when we peeped in from under. One of the guys decided that he was going to risk a shaft and try to get one of those inside the wreck. He went down on his belly and started crawling in the gap. The plan for this maneuver is that the two of us will stay outside behind him, and when he shakes his fin sideways, we will drag him out by the fins. So there he was, prone on his belly inside the wreck with just the fin tips outside. Normally, this process is very fast. You just shoot it and get out. He was in there for like 10 minutes without moving. This was when we realized that something wasn't right. I looked at the other guy and he looked at me, shrugging his shoulders. We grabbed him by the fins and hauled him out. When he came out, he seemed to be in a daze. He was breathing normally, but his eyes were wide opened. We signaled to ask him if he was okay, but he gave us no response. This was when we decided to abort the dive and we slowly made our way up. When we got back on board, we asked him what he saw inside. How come it took him so long to get a shot? His reply was, he was only in there for less than 30 seconds. He saw a lot of big red snappers lined up in front of him, not moving. And then there was a man lying next to the snappers with big black eyes staring at him. He just felt confused and couldn't move. He just kept staring into those black eyes. It was only when he reached the surface that he came back to his senses. He couldn't remember ascending with us at all. I have relatives in Malaysia and recently went there for a funeral. This story was told to me by my relative when he saw the same priest that was performing the rites for the dead person. He said that this same priest performed rites for another guy in Kedah in Malaysia, and something strange happened, which even this priest told him that it was his first time witnessing such a thing. By the way, my relative was there at both funerals. Just some backgrounds, funerals in Malaysia usually last 1 to 2 nights, and the funeral rites are very long. It's not uncommon to see them stretch to 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning. So for this funeral, the priest and the relatives were calling the spirit back at around 11 p.m. The streets were quiet and there was no wind. They tried a few times, but to no avail. After more than a few tries, the dogs on the street suddenly started to whine and bark. The wind grew stronger. At this moment, everyone was still kneeling down, but suddenly, one of the relatives, a young guy in his 20s, jumped up. He then shouted, "She's back!" and knocked into all the others who were kneeling down. He ran into a room in the back of the house and was apparently very shaken. The rest ran into the room to check on him, and suddenly this guy was possessed and spoke in strange tongues. 4 to 5 strong men tried to subdue him, but they couldn't. The priest then realized that this guy was wearing a Buddha pendant on his neck and pulled it out immediately. The guy then collapsed and fainted, but woke up shortly afterwards. Just when everyone thought that everything was over, the priest was explaining that this guy committed a sin by wearing a Buddha pendant and kneeling down in front of the deceased. Buddha is God and shouldn't kneel down to people. That was why he was possessed. This part I'm not too sure about, so I want to hear what you guys think. Anyways, back to the story. When the priest was explaining halfway and everyone was taking a rest, suddenly, the mom of the guy who was possessed went to the coffin and shouted loudly at the corpse. She shouted, "You are dead and shouldn't come back to harm the living." The priest ran outside to where the coffin and the lady was and started using his tools to contain the situation. The lady then calmed down and fainted. After all of these experiences, everyone was scared and nobody really wanted to do anything. The priest then explained what was going on. He also asked if this family were praying to a master or some sort because this lady was possessed by a master, and the relatives said yes. This family also was not from Malaysia, and this was the first time they met the priest. The priest started to wrap everything up and got everyone to sit down and explain what happened. He said that for the first case, the young guy, he shouldn't wear a Buddha pendant and kneel in front of the deceased, and reminded everyone next time to not do the same thing. As for the second case, the lady was too overwhelmed with emotions when she saw her son being possessed, and thus invoked another spirit to possess her. A group of 10 friends went to check in at a local chalet to celebrate their poly graduation. They brought along tons of entertainment, like card games, small mahjong set, music, beer, etc., to get through the night. When it was near dinner time, the guys set up the barbecue pits, leaving the girls to chat in the comfort of the aircon room. Food and beer was enough to get things started, and the group of friends became rowdy after the alcohol. After they had their food, a few of them suggested cycling and swimming to cool themselves down, leaving a group of 4 behind in the room as they wanted to play mahjong. Let's call them Eric, Ben, Jesse, and Jay. After a few rounds, Jay was unhappy. He did not win a single match and shuffled the mahjong tiles with so much force that some of the tiles flipped over the table. The rest of them picked up the tiles and continued to play. That is when something went wrong. In a mahjong match, the zhuangjie and the opposite side will both have 19 by 2 tiles. Those who know how to play mahjong should know, while the other 2 players will have 18 by 2 tiles lined up in front of them. However, after Jay flipped the tiles, they could not continue the game because they only had 18 by 2 for the 4 players, which means 4 tiles had gone missing. All 4 of them went to look for the tiles in the room. They looked under the table, under the bed, and even in the toilet, but they could still not find it. That is when Ben and Eric suggested to overturn the tiles to see which tiles were missing, so at least they could tell their friend. After pairing up all the sets, to their horror, all the 4 Hmong went missing. This really freaked the 4 of them out, and they looked at one another with blank expression, thinking what would be the most logical thing to do next. That was when the door opened and one of their classmates had returned from his swim. "Hey Ben, what are you guys playing for? How come we got 4 Hmong tiles lined outside at our shoes there?" Not wanting to believe his classmate, Ben went over to the door to see for himself, and there it was. The 4 tiles were lying at the shoe steps. He returned the mahjong tiles to the set, and without bidding his classmate goodbye, the 4 of them left the chalet without spending the night and without telling the rest of their classmates about their encounter. I have an older cousin who has a third eye ever since they were young. Lucky for us, she usually doesn't say anything in front of us if she sees anything. But she said that if she suddenly becomes very quiet or asks us to walk away, we must follow her instructions. My cousin used to stay in a very rural area in northern Johor, which is near Malacca area in a small village, about 20 households maximum. Around 20 to 23 years ago, I always visited her home when she was young. There was a makeshift Indian shrine behind her home near a small stream. We always played there together with some other cousins whenever I visited them. There was this one afternoon when it was about to rain at about 4 to 5 p.m. and we were playing near the shrine when she shouted at us, "Come back now!" and she ran towards us and pulled us away and brought us home. It was only a few months later when we had a gathering that she told us what happened. She said that she saw an Indian ghost that was trying to play with us, and the ghost seemed like it wanted to join us and disturb us. The ghost didn't look so friendly, and it had an evil intention. Suddenly, an Indian god that resembled the god at the makeshift shrine appeared and subdued the ghost. That was when she shouted at us to go home immediately. Another story was told to me by my mom's close friend. She was giving birth in a private hospital in the west of Singapore about 20 years ago. After she gave birth that night and was resting on her bed, she was woken up by someone pulling her blanket and also something pulling at her arm at around 4 a.m. The thing suddenly said, You are sleeping on my bed. Get out." She was deeply afraid and decided to pray to Guan Yin and Erlang Shen, when suddenly she said she saw Erlang Shen appear and take the ghost away. How true this story is, I have no idea. But for this auntie, after a few years, she went to learn from a master and founded a home temple to help others ward away evil and pray for the people. She is not a medium, and she mainly does praying, feng shui, and helping people set up altars at home. Nowadays, she's become very successful because she has been able to make her clients go from rags to riches. I remember a time when she helped my parents purchase a new Guan Yin statue. She said that even though all the statues are the same, there are some statues that makes you feel at ease and warmth within when you look at it. If you see that one, that's the one you should bring home, as it is the one that will protect your house. I have a story to share, but nothing creepy because I'm not good at giving creepy stories. All young children usually have sensitive bodies because they are pure, especially true 20 to 40 years ago. I used to stay in a large kampong in Singapore every weekend and school holidays before I turned 11. That was in the 80s. Kampong was built in the 70s. The land was huge, about 1 acre or so. It was a brick and wooden house that had 3 bedrooms, a TV lounge, and 4 sliding doors as the main door. There was also a huge altar out there with several dogs. Based on my childhood memory, I think the house was around 170 square meters. The outdoor and separated kitchen was around 60 square meters. There was an outdoor sheltered dining area and a separated kitchen room. There was a 1 meter by 1 meter well there too. That well was pretty much my science assignment, as there was all sorts of water plants where I could use for my primary school science project. As it is a kampong house, there is a tall step into the rooms, about 0.8 meters in height, and the floorings are black thick wooden boards that can be removed. Once you remove them, you could use the space as storage. It's hard to describe unless you have stayed in one before, but anyways, the important thing is that it squeaked with any movement on the floorboard. During the daytime, it was fine, but when night falls, I dreaded it, especially when I have to wake up to go use the bathroom. The feeling was extremely terrible for some nights. Waking up at midnight, going to the toilet, was dreadful. I didn't want to wake my mom up, so like any other kid, I rubbed my jade pendant and put it in my mouth and ran to the bathroom. There were some nights where my 3-year-old brother would wake up looking at me, wondering where I was going. He also needed to use the bathroom, and we chose to go together. Each movement we made gave a squeak. This squeak frightened the both of us. This went on for many years until, at one point, we dreaded it so much that our parents didn't want us to stay overnights for the weekends anymore. We really enjoyed being there though. It was really fun. In those days, we had a TV and were able to play computer games. The interesting thing, however, is that the dog that we owned sometimes could not stop barking during evening meals or late at night before we slept. This dog was with us for years. He is very smart and never unnecessarily barks. He was always barking at the AC unit outside the living area that is right beside the bedroom. Even during the day, instead of lying down by the well I mentioned earlier, he loved to stand around the AC unit looking at it. He passed away when I was 11. It was a few years later, when I was in secondary, that we rented the kampong for free to a Thailand monk to stay in for some time. It was then that he told us of a strange discovery. He said that there was always a female ghost in red sitting on the AC unit and always there whenever we went to stay over. The monk said that she meant no harm. She passed by the place one day and decided to just sit on the AC as she liked it. But her presence greatly disturbed the place, so the monk had to ask her to go. Out of curiosity, my dad asked, how long has she been there? The monk said that she was there for a very long time. My dad, as a non-believer, told us during dinner that rituals were being performed by the monk as tokens of appreciation. So now, whenever a dog barks the same way my old dog did, I know that there's a bad ghost wandering around. It is a very different kind of barking, one that may make you question what is standing there.